Imagine for a moment that there is a secret so powerful, so profound, and so disturbing that even the wisest people in the church were afraid to speak about it. Something that wasn't written to frighten, but to awaken. Something that, according to accounts, was revealed to a simple Italian friar named Padre Pio, a man who bore mysterious marks on his hands, who claimed to see things that no one else saw, and who seemed to hear voices coming from a place few can imagine. Now, think about this. What if this secret had everything to do with Judgment Day? Yes, the same final judgment that so many people imagine as a great moment of revelation, shock, and truth. But here, in this video, you will discover that it may be very different from what you always thought. What you're about to hear is not fantasy, not invention, not a story to scare anyone. It is a collection of real accounts, letters, and testimonies linked to one of the most respected and studied saints in modern history. And the most impressive thing is that many of these warnings seem to coincide with things that are already happening around us today. Why were these messages saved, hidden, or forgotten? What was it about them that seemed so dangerous, so serious, or so difficult to explain? Why had so many people, even devout ones, never heard of them? Perhaps because revealing these warnings would change the way you see the world. Perhaps because some of these revelations seem frighteningly close to what we are experiencing now. Or perhaps because no one was truly prepared to hear them. But today, you will hear. Today, you're going to enter a mystery that should never have been revealed. And before we continue, I need to ask you, do you believe that some spiritual warnings are given before major events? If you believe, take a deep breath. If you don't believe it, this video might change your mind. Because what Padre Pio revealed about the Last Judgment is not just a prophecy, it's a warning. And maybe it's for you. To understand why so many people take Padre Pio's revelations so seriously, we first need to look at who he really was. Not just an ordinary friar, but someone who seemed to carry a different mission, almost too heavy for a human being. Imagine a simple person living in a small convent who was still sought out by thousands of people who believed he could see beyond what the eyes could see. Padre Pio had something that drew attention. His hands bled every day, as if carrying invisible wounds that only he understood. These were the stigmata, signs that many believed to be a direct gift from God. But that wasn't all. There are stories documented by soldiers, doctors, and even church superiors recounting how Padre Pio appeared in two places at the same time, a bilocation here, another there. He was seen in the convent, but in the same minute someone swore they had found him on the battlefield, praying for young people who were about to die. And often, these young people survived inexplicably. Furthermore, Padre Pio had visions. He claimed to see the state of souls, as if people's hearts were an open book to him. And when he spoke, many people felt they weren't just hearing advice, but a warning. This led even powerful people, authorities, doctors, and intellectuals to travel for days just to hear him for a few minutes. Padre Pio spoke of difficult times, profound changes, and a future that could only be understood by those who were attentive. He didn't speak to frighten, but to prepare. And he always insisted, listen to the signs. When Padre Pio spoke about the future, he never used complicated words. He didn't want to seem like a difficult teacher, but rather a concerned father, trying to warn his children about something that was coming. And that's exactly how the accounts of the first warning emerged. The idea that the world was heading towards a time of purification. A cleansing, not in the sense of destroying everything, but of revealing what was hidden, separating right from wrong, and making each person look inside themselves as perhaps they never had before. In some letters and testimonies from the period between 1950 and 1960, attributed to him, Padre Pio spoke of a kind of spiritual storm that would come when humanity was more fragile, more distracted, and more distant from God. And looking at the world today, it's hard not to make connections. wars that suddenly erupt, political conflicts that spread like wildfire, broken families, violence becoming commonplace, and a general feeling that people are more anxious, confused, and lost than before. Father Pio said that the signs would not only be major events, but also small changes in human behavior. He believed that the world would enter a cycle of moral upheaval, where faith would be set aside and where people would begin to normalize what was previously considered serious. A time when truth would be distorted and lies, if repeated many times, would eventually seem true. Has that time already begun? When we watch the news, when we observe how many people treat each other, when we realize how much selfishness has grown, it's not hard to imagine that we are living exactly what Padre Pio tried to warn about. He said that the world could reach such a confusing point that the only way to regain balance would be through a great purification, something permitted by God not to punish, but to awaken humanity from a deep sleep. And this brings us to an important point. Padre Pio never spoke of destruction as a threat, but as a call for change. For him, the worst kind of end was not physical, but spiritual. Losing faith, losing love, losing the ability to recognize good. If this time of purification has already begun, how should each of us react? Ignore it, pretend nothing is happening, or pay attention to the signs that are already around us? When Padre Pio spoke of the future, he always made it clear that the greatest danger would not come from wars, catastrophes, or supernatural phenomena. The greatest danger, according to him, would come from the human heart. And it is precisely here that the most ignored sign emerges, the complete loss of the notion of the sacred for Padre Pio. This would be one of the first and most serious warnings of the approach of a time of great transformation, perhaps even the final judgment. And the most curious thing is that this sign does not appear suddenly. It arrives slowly, like a fog, that covers everything without anyone noticing. Father Pio said that when people begin to treat faith as something unimportant, the whole world loses its balance. He said that the sacred is not only in churches, but mainly in attitudes, respect, truth, compassion, prayer, and moral conscience. And when this disappears, the world enters a state of such great confusion that even simple things become difficult to understand. It's as if humanity extinguishes its own light and tries to walk in the dark. Now let's look at the world today. Children grow up without spiritual guidance. Families fight over trivial matters. People humiliate others as if it were normal. Violence has become daily news, and lies spread faster than the truth. Many treat faith like an old object stored away in a drawer, and when someone speaks about God, it's almost seen as something strange. Padre Pio already warned about this. People don't believe it until the punishment comes. And here is the most shocking point. For him, this loss of the sacred would be as powerful a sign as any grand physical event. The world would not fall apart first on the outside, but on the inside. And when the interior crumbles, the exterior becomes a consequence. That is why Padre Pio insisted so much on keeping the soul awake, because when the sacred is ignored, the rest of life loses direction. He said that the greatest danger was not the end of the world, but the end of faith within each person. When Padre Pio warned about the future, he said that the signs of the time of purification would not only be spiritual, but also visible in society itself. And what most caught his attention was moral collapse of the world, something that, according to him, would happen gradually until people would begin to call normal what was previously considered extremely serious. For many scholars of Padre Pio's life, this would be one of the clearest signs that something bigger was approaching, perhaps even the end times, described in biblical prophecies. Father Pio said that humanity would begin to lose its way when good was treated as an excess and evil was seen as freedom. And when we observe what is happening today, it is not difficult to understand why so many believe that he truly foresaw our times. Wars that erupt overnight, leaving millions adrift. Economic crises that transform entire families. Unstable governments, corrupt leaders, injustices that repeat themselves as if they were part of the routine. It's as if the world is constantly on the verge of a nervous breakdown. But that's not all. Padre Pio said that the moral collapse would be felt within homes, in conversations, in choices, and in the small acts of daily life. He said that people would become cold, impatient, aggressive, and incapable of forgiving. Love would diminish. Compassion would be treated as weakness, and truth would become something malleable, used according to personal interests. If you look around you, you will notice how frighteningly current this prediction seems. And what's most striking is that Padre Pio didn't say this as someone judging the world. He spoke with pain, like someone who sees a child walking towards a precipice and tries to warn them, shout, call out, but almost no one listens. He knew that the loss of morality would destroy not only families, but entire societies. A nation without morality, he said, is like a house without a foundation. Any strong wind will knock it down. Among all the concerns that Padre Pio carried, there was one that few understood at the time, but which makes much more sense today: the silence of the Church in the face of the spiritual dangers that humanity was experiencing. It wasn't a silence born of malice or indifference, but a silence born of fear, political pressures, cultural changes, and above all, the difficulty of speaking openly about topics that frightened people. Padre Pio perceived this and was uneasy, because he saw how costly this silence could be for the world. There are accounts that Padre Pio insisted to church superiors on the importance of preaching more about conversion, repentance, and spiritual vigilance. He said that the world was about to face very difficult times and that people needed to be prepared internally, not just emotionally, but spiritually. He believed that faith should be like a light shining in a dark tunnel. If that light went out, humanity would be completely lost. But according to him, many within the church itself were afraid of frightening the faithful. They wanted to avoid controversy, conflict, and criticism, and with that, important themes began to disappear from the pulpits. The word judgment was replaced by lighter messages. The idea of sin became merely a human error, and the call for a change of life gave way to more comfortable discourses. Padre Pio saw this as a great danger. When the Church stops warning, the world collapses without realizing it. Internal crises, scandals, divisions, and even silent persecutions in various countries. Many faithful feel that something is missing, that the Church seems more concerned with social debates than with the salvation of souls. And the most curious thing is that this is exactly what Padre Pio warned against. He said that before a great spiritual event, faith itself would be tested from within, not by external enemies, but by internal weaknesses. Among all the mysteries surrounding Padre Pio, few arouse as much curiosity as those sealed letters. These documents, according to various sources, contained revelations about the future of humanity. Some say they were written by him personally. Others claim they were accounts recorded by people very close to the friar, who noted his visions and warnings. The fact is that a large part of these letters has never been fully made public, and this in itself already raises an alarm. What was there that no one dared to reveal? Some of these letters, supposedly sent to church members between the 1950s and 1960s, spoke of days of great suffering, confusion, and purification. They narrated events that resembled natural disasters, social crises, and even physical darkness engulfing the planet. It is not known for certain which parts were officially confirmed by the Vatican, but many religious figures, including superiors of monasteries, claim to have had access, even if only partially, to passages that spoke of the Last Judgment. What is most striking is that, despite The air of mystery, some fragments of these revelations ended up circulating among people close to Padre Pio, and these fragments describe, with symbolic and impactful detail, events that, decades later, seem frighteningly familiar. Unexpected wars, rapidly spreading diseases, internal conflicts within the Church itself, and a humanity increasingly distant from God. Father Pio never wanted his messages to be used to generate panic. He said that God does not send warnings to frighten, but to prepare. So why were some of these letters kept secret? Why were certain contents never openly disclosed? Were they too strong, too worrying, or perhaps too revealing? Are there documents about the future of humanity kept under lock and key within the Church? This question has been asked countless times, and every time it comes up, it reignites the mystery surrounding Padre Pio. The fact is that, true or not, confirmed or not, these letters deeply touched those who had access to them, and they left a clear impression. Padre Pio believed that the world would go through something great, something that would mark history and spiritually separate those who were prepared from those who simply ignored the signs. And in a way, perhaps that's why so many of these letters are still kept to this day. Among all the revelations attributed to Padre Pio, there is one that has become almost a symbol of the end times. The 3 days of darkness. Many associate this prophecy directly with the last judgment, while others see it as a period of purification before the great spiritual renewal. The fact is that, since the mid-20th century, this theme has circulated among the faithful religious figures and scholars, always shrouded in mystery and fear. And Padre Pio, even without official confirmation of all the details, frequently appears as one of the voices that mentioned this event. According to accounts from people who knew him, Padre Pio spoke of times when humanity would be enveloped in darkness, not only physical but also spiritual. He said there would be a moment when the light of the world, faith, morality, love, truth, would seem to disappear. And for many, this explanation was not just metaphor. It seemed like a real warning about a period when the planet would face something unprecedented. The famous prophecy of the 3 days of darkness speaks of a time when the sky would be completely closed, as if the world was swallowed by an endless night. During this period, according to some passages attributed to letters and testimonies, no one should open doors or windows, and the only safe light would be that of blessed candles. But the most important point is not the physical detail, but the spiritual one. The darkness would be a reflection of what humanity has become, a world that has extinguished the sacred. And when we observe the world today, it's not difficult to understand why this prophecy has regained strength. Many people feel lost, empty, and frightened by the way things are going. Crises arise without warning, diseases spread rapidly, and violence seems to increase like a flame fueled by the wind. For those who believe, all this sounds like the beginning of a period of inner darkness, the so-called spiritual darkness that Padre Pio so often mentioned. Padre Pio used to say that after darkness, light would come, that the world would go through a profound moment of purification, but that humanity would be reborn, different, more conscious, more united, and closer to God. The truth is that Padre Pio didn't want anyone to be afraid, but rather to be prepared. Because according to him, what comes after the darkness is always more important than the darkness itself. Father Pio always said that God speaks to humanity in many ways, and one of them is through nature itself. For him, earthquakes, violent storms, extreme droughts, and even mysterious illnesses were not just random phenomena, but signs that demanded attention. Not to create panic, but to awaken. He believed that nature obeyed God, and when something escaped human control, it was as if the entire universe was trying to warn us. Humanity needs to get back on the right track. When we look at the world around us, It's impossible not to recall these words. In just a few years, we've seen earthquakes devastate entire cities in minutes. We've seen tsunamis engulf coastal regions as if the sea had awakened in fury. We've seen volcanoes dormant for centuries unexpectedly come back to life. And of course, we've seen a pandemic spread across the entire planet, changing everything in a matter of months. For many people, these events no longer seem like coincidences. They seem like chapters in a larger warning. Father Pio always said that natural signs would be like knocks on the door, first gentle, then insistent, until no one could ignore them. And if we stop to think about it, that's exactly what's happening. The planet is agitated, unstable, unpredictable. The seasons are out of control. The cold arrives when it should be hot. The heat intensifies when it should be winter. Scientists talk about climate change, but Father Pio spoke of spiritual changes reflected in creation. And here's the most interesting point. According to many accounts, Padre Pio believed that these phenomena were not punishments but warnings, invitations to reflection, to change, to conversion. He said that every sign in nature had a hidden message. Wake up before it's too late. What if all these events we are experiencing, catastrophes, pandemics, imbalances, were already part of the scenario that Padre Pio tried to warn us about? Perhaps nature isn't screaming to destroy, but to save, to remind us that something bigger is happening, something that cannot be ignored. Padre Pio believed that God speaks through the wind, the earth, and time. The question is, are we listening? Padre Pio was always very clear when speaking about one of the most dangerous signs for humanity, rulers who live and govern as if God did not exist. For him, this would be one of the greatest indications that the world was entering a decisive period, perhaps even the time preceding the final judgment. It wasn't just about politics, but about spirituality. Padre Pio said that when power completely distances itself from the sacred, the whole of society pays the price. And one only needs to look at recent history to understand what he meant. 20th century, dictators oppressed entire peoples, generating wars, famine, and destruction on an unprecedented scale. Leaders who considered themselves greater than life itself created regimes that eliminated millions. And according to many scholars, Padre Pio even warned that this kind of soulless power would become more common as the world lost its moral and spiritual foundation. But his warnings didn't stop in the past. Padre Pio said that rulers who completely reject the faith, or who use power to manipulate, control, and divide, create fertile ground for corruption, violence, and injustice. He asserted that the absence of God in the hearts of leaders generates a lack of God in their decisions, and decisions without God always end up hurting the most vulnerable. When we look at the current world scenario, we realize that many conflicts, tensions, and crises are linked precisely to this. Hardened leaders, suffering people, decisions made without moral conscience. Padre Pio said that these leaders would emerge as a sign that humanity was approaching a period of revelation, a time when evil would show itself more clearly so that the truth could finally shine. When Padre Pio spoke about the Last Judgment, he never described that moment as a sudden explosion or a chaotic movie scene. For him, the Last Judgment would be, above all, a moment of separation. Not a physical separation, but a spiritual one. Light and darkness, truth and falsehood, love and selfishness, faith and indifference. Padre Pio said that the true end began within people, when each heart would be placed before its own conscience and before God. According to accounts from the faithful and religious who lived with him, Padre Pio explained that the judgment would not only be about what we have done, but about what we choose to be. He said that every day we make small choices that bring us closer to the light or further away from it, and that, on the final day, these choices would be revealed like an open book. Nothing hidden, nothing disguised, nothing explained with excuses. It would be the moment of absolute truth, The most interesting thing is that Padre Pio described judgment as a kind of ultimate mirror. He said that God condemns no one. Each person walks where their heart points. If the heart seeks the light, it will be drawn to it. If the heart becomes accustomed to darkness, it gets lost in it, not as punishment, but as a consequence. And when we look at the world today, this vision becomes even clearer. We live in a time when people are becoming increasingly divided, extreme opinions, growing hatred, aggression becoming commonplace, lack of empathy dominating discussions. It seems that humanity is separating itself without realizing it, as if each person were choosing which side to follow, the side of light or the side of darkness, long before any final event. Father Pio said that the final judgment would begin in the conscience, that before God judges the world would judge itself through its own choices, attitudes, and priorities. And when the truth came to light, nothing could be hidden. Padre Pio believed that the greatest battle of the end times would not be between nations, but between good and evil within the human heart. And every decision we make already places us on one side of this story. Among all the messages attributed to Padre Pio, there is one that has endured for decades with the same power. The great invitation to spiritual preparation for him. The Last Judgment was not a terrible sentence, but an urgent call for each person to awaken. Padre Pio tirelessly repeated that God never leaves the world without direction. He sends warnings, signs, and opportunities for change. But it is up to each person to decide whether to listen or ignore them. Father Pio said that even in times of confusion, fear, and spiritual darkness, there was a simple path, so simple that many ignored it. This path was formed by 5 pillars: prayer, conversion, confession, charity, and vigilance. These were not complicated practices, nor mysterious rituals. They were attitudes that illuminated the heart, strengthened the soul, and prepared the person for any difficult time, including the end times. According to testimonies, Padre Pio stated that humanity did not need to fear the final judgment. Fear would only dominate those who left their spiritual lives empty. He said that a soul that lives in the light, however small, never fears the darkness. The problem, according to him, was not the end of the world, but the end of faith within each person. And this end indeed could already be felt in human behavior, in coldness, indifference, lack of love, and rejection of the sacred. And here is the most moving part of his warning. Padre Pio believed that everyone had a chance, even those who made many mistakes, who strayed, who lost their faith. He said that God doesn't seek perfect people, but those who are willing to start over, to change, to open their hearts. For him, the final judgment would be less about punishment and more about revelation, revealing who truly chose to walk with God and who preferred to ignore the call. After all the warnings, signs, accounts, and mysteries surrounding Padre Pio, we arrive at the most important point. What does all this mean for us today? Padre Pio never wanted people to panic. He didn't talk about the Last Judgment to frighten or create fear, but to awaken. For him, every prophecy, every vision, every revelation had a single purpose: to prepare humanity. And observing the world around us, wars, crises, diseases, abrupt changes, loss of the sacred, increasing violence, moral confusion, it's difficult not to remember his words. It's as if everything is falling into place in a grand scenario he tried to warn about decades ago. But even so, Padre Pio made it clear: nothing is lost for those who choose the light. He knew that, regardless of what happened in the world, each person had within themselves the strength to remain steadfast, change their life, and influence everything around them. The most moving thing is that for Padre Pio, the Last Judgment was not the end. It was the start, a beginning for those who walked in truth, in love, in faith. He said that God abandons no one, but that each person writes their own spiritual story through the choices they make every day. And now I ask you the same question he would ask: Who do you want to be when the truth comes out? Someone who lived asleep, or someone who chose to awaken? The world may change, times may darken, but within you there is a light that no one can extinguish. Padre Pio deeply believed this. He believed in you, and perhaps that is why these warnings have reached you, to remind you that you still have time to choose the right path. If this message touched your heart, write in the comments, "I choose the light." And if you wish to continue following the announcements, messages, and mysteries connected to Padre Pio, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps this truth reach more people who need to hear it today.
The true prophetic message.